It was the kind of calm afternoon where everything appeared normal, but I didn't know that my entire world was going to change. Upside down, I didn't anticipate that a straightforward request from my brother would result in something that I couldn't even envision, and something that would be captured on camera for public viewing. The serene expression in his eyes that day, the first indication that it was nearly too tranquil. I was unaware that something was wrong at the time. However, I was going to be forced into a circumstance that will always haunt me. Begin with our dog, Max, who was constantly loving and silly golden retriever who appeared friendly with everyone. He'd been a long-time member of our family and we spent a great deal of time together. Although my brother had a different idea that day, he had the camera positioned in the living room behaving as though it was only another entertaining video concept. Yet I sensed something was about to go horribly wrong. I was apprehensive, but he was relentlessly persuading me that it would be harmless, simply another pointless challenge. I attempted to dismiss it as something for us to do. Just another of his crazy notions. But when I observed how he was arranging the camera, a chilly chill went through Miss Pine. He wasn't merely going to capture a straightforward video, he seemed to be forcing me to perform an action that I wasn't certain I could manage. But my heart was pounding. I questioned how far he would go. Consider this and whether I could even stop it. Once it begins, it will be with that expression in his eyes, he added, funny once more as if he knew something that I didn't. But I was already too, so what could I say? The camera is rolling far away, and my brother keeping the leash and directing me to I wasn't ready to make that choice. Andy recognized then that I was going to do something that I did on video with Maxie. Never imagined I would, but what transpired. Max sat there next, and you won't believe it. Unaware of what was happening, wagging his tail about to happen. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that there was a problem, but my brother simply gave me a smile as though everything was going great for him. This ability to persuade me to do things I wouldn't typically do, and in that I felt helpless for a moment. What was intended to be a harmless and enjoyable video had swiftly evolved into something far greater. The camera was rolling, which was awkward. The situation's weight started to weigh. It dawned on me that my brother had always been a practical joker, constantly searching for the next big thing that will attract attention. However, this felt unusual. It wasn't like normal. He would do absurd things for social media. This was a more intimate matter, something that might easily go too far. He hesitated for a moment, staring at Max, before my brother, attempting to determine what he requested. That I make the space feel smaller. Just trust me, the air is thicker, he said. Wouldn't those words make everything alright? But I didn't feel alright. Anxious, not knowing what would happen next, I continued to reflect on how Max had been for so long. He was a member of our family. He was family, not just a pet, and however, I found myself in front of a camera uncertain about my ability to pass regardless of what my brother had intended. My thoughts were racing, wondering if this was truly the type of material I desired to participate in, but the camera was rolling immediately, and I could see my waiting for me to approach. Brother, we became more tense with each other. Slipping by, I had never felt sound-sure about something previously. But it was difficult due to my brother's relentless drive. My instinct urged me to pull out now. To pause and leave, but what if it was too late, and then right before I say something, and he looked at me once more. The one who caused me to doubt everything. The only sound in the room was the Max's tail tapping sound against the floor. It seemed like time had stopped, and I was stuck right now, unable to clearly think or move. My brother's eyes locked onto my own, and I sensed the pressure building up throughout my body. Screamed and left to inform him of this. Was excessive, yet the camera remained rolling with a flashing red light. Eventually, I found myself trapped in this awkward limbo in light of the fact that whatever transpired next would mold everything. But I can't find the right words. You overanalyzing it, so stop it. Nearly reading my mind, my brother remarked. But how could I have missed something regarding his behavior, which made my gut churn? He wasn't who I thought he was. Spent my childhood with the one who would laugh off his outrageous notions or offer an apology when went too far. This was not the same. There was a stern resolve at the heart of his behaviors, and I came to understand that for him this centered on more than simply a video. It was about, perhaps it was about something more profound. Control, or perhaps it was about demonstrating something I couldn't quite put my finger on. He touched it with my finger. But whatever it was, Max glanced up at me and knew it wasn't right. Though he could sense my uneasiness with his eye, tried to calm them with big, trusting eyes, reminding myself that he was only a dog, and that wouldn't change. Booty then considered the individuals who would observe these outsiders who would observe judging from their screens. And discussing and dissecting every small information. I didn't want to be a moment I would regret something that would haunt me. For the remainder of my days. But with I felt myself every second that went by. Descending more into this uncomfortable. My brother is unable to escape reality. Approached with his hand still clutching. Max was led by the leash in front of the camera. The way he now looks at me, extended use of the playfulness I was accustomed to, also added a little sharpness, which caused the hair on the stand up the back of my neck. It's only for, he said, fun, remember, almost as if he were attempting to persuade himself of that. I tried to force a smile as I nodded. However, the truth was that my heart wasn't in it. I was unsure if I could follow through on despite my instincts telling me to halt. Part of me was afraid of what might occur if I would my brother become enraged. Encourage me to pursue what I didn't want me to be, unable to identify what passing through his thoughts, yet the burden of his demands were placed on me. It's getting harder every second. Max tail wagged once more, unaware of that the room is becoming tense, but it wasn't. I stuck and uncertain about whether he was committing an error that might alter every choice. Felt like it might be incorrect, and the anxiety of I felt regret like a thundercloud, threatening to explode at any second. What exactly did my brother want from me? My thoughts were racing, and the burden of it was intolerable at the time, and the camera kept constantly flashing its red light. Note that this was not merely a private matter. Moment no longer, it was a show. Andy looked at everyone who would be watching. Max, who had now reclined in front of me gazing at myself while wearing those his affection was seen by naive, trusting eyes, was evident to me, and I knew he had no idea how bad things had gotten. It made everything feel worse, as though in some way I was betraying him, and I could. My gut is twisted into knots. Brother still standing there. Observing me with an expression that made his heart was racing, but he remained silent, patiently awaiting my next creation. There was something unsettling about the move, how silent he had grown, like if he was aware that the strain was increasing and all he wanted was for me to lose it. Every second dragged on, and I sensed overthink things, like I couldn't breathe. He repeated it, but in a milder tone that was almost enticing yet felt even more cunning now that I could see. Despite his serene demeanor, the way his body language never left my gaze. Taut and in control, as though he was challenging me to see it through to the end. Regardless of the twisted notion he had, and he had that edge in his voice, mind you. Now the kind that demonstrated that this wasn't simply a recommendation, it was a directive, and that the longer I hesitated, the more I sensed the room sensed his mounting impatience. Diminishing with each second that goes by, and I felt the partitions closing in. What I was truly terrified about letting him down by losing that bond we had matured, or was I terrified of what would occur if I resisted? But I was definitely no longer, yet the longer I stood the more there is the sense of being entrapment took hold, and I was unable to see a way out. My brother had already set out all up, and the pressure to fit in seemed oppressive, as if he had everything the authority in this circumstance, and I had. Max stood up and paced anxiously. His actions now reflect my uneasiness. He sensed the shift in the atmosphere, and I felt as though even worse, my brother moved closer to the every movement is captured by the camera, and I felt my heartbeat quicken. I was at the cliff's brink, and any action I made might cause me to fall into. Come on, something I wasn't expecting. My brother's voice is now sharper. And a chill went through my body. Simply do it, but what exactly was I going to do? Feel the pounding of my heart in my chest as I recognized I couldn't go back. At this point the level of anxiety in the room had peaked, and I was on the verge of losing it. I'm curious how this will all finish. My heart thumped in my chest, and I felt the perspiration beginning to flow. Every part of me longed to touch my forehead, yell to shoo my brother away and close remove the camera. But I was unable. Told me brother was under too much pressure. Looking at me so intently as if he challenged me to disrupt the room's atmosphere, suffocating as if I couldn't get out regardless of my desire to see. Max, suddenly, the nervously pacing halted. He became alert and froze, staring. He seemed to have felt something at the door. Anything that neither my brother nor I had. Each of us looked at each other in confusion. Halting briefly, uncertain of what had. The tension in the room just happened. Thickened. And this is the first time that when it all began, I had a feeling of urgency that didn't originate with me. Something wasn't right, brother. And no longer only about the video before I could comprehend what was taking place. Though I turned my head when the door creaked open. Missing a beat when I recognized our mom. When she entered the room, her eyes broad with perplexity and a hint of terror in her face, shifting her gaze from me to my brother, and then noticing the camera. What was happening right away? And what is this? Her voice rose in anxiety as she questioned, what's happening? And why is the camera on, with you two right away? My brother froze, revealing a fleeting flash of he was afraid that she wouldn't walk. Not right now, not even for a moment. The same individual who had shoved me was there. Into this awkward circumstance falter abruptly, but then as fast when he recovered, a smile appeared on his with a strained serenity. He added, face relax, Mom. It's only a video, nothing significant, and we are enjoying myself a little. But I could see me mother wasn't buying it via him. And I wasn't either. Her eyes were narrowed and she was clearly more than just worried. She was glancing at me regarding the camera. Her eyes are already softening with a mixture of uncertainty and concern. It was evident that she sensed that something wasn't quite right. Even if she wasn't certain what it was what was happening, she said again. Speech is somewhat calmer yet still infused with you two appear to be worried about going to blow up what you're doing to Max. Heard. It was words that struck me like a ton of bricks, like though all I'd been experiencing along with my increasing uneasiness. My anxiety, the situation's weight had caused anxiety. Simply thrust themselves onto me and I wanted to tell her everything right now. To describe how I was pushed by my brother. Into carrying out a task that I wasn't comfortable with. But I was unable to locate the Max. I was breathing heavily as I spoke, like if noticing the shift in the environment started. His tail, which was nestled between his body language and legs, were incorrect. He could sense that he was nervous and upset. The tension as best as I could observe my mother's worried and contorted face. Her eyes jerked as she glanced at him. Tell us what's happening with him, she asked as he moved forward. Max. He's never behaved in this manner prior to opening my eye. Opened my lips to reply, but nothing came out. Brother had become silent and was standing stiffly. I in silence, without uttering a word. Was the in, and at that moment, I understood that this was more than a straightforward video concept. This went beyond merely producing material. For some, it was all about control. About pushing limits and influencing events to obtain what just when I believed that was what he wanted. The doorbell rang when things couldn't be much worse. The abrupt noise cut through the tension inside the space, and for a short moment, there was a moment when everything felt frozen. Glanced at the door and then back at her. Expression is now a mixture of I was afraid and confused, because I knew that whoever was not going to make it to the door. Anything simpler. It was similar to the cosmos was working together to drive us. Even as we dug deeper into this quagmire, what would occur next? I couldn't get the sensation out of my head, believing that the worst was still to come. The doorbell rang once more loudly, and the abrupt noise broke the tense. My mother's eyes were silent in the room. Worriedly hurried in the direction of the door with quick, brisk steps. I paused to observe her, uncertain of what would occur next, as my brother remained keeping a mask on his face while standing by the camera. Icy poise, but I could see the fissures starting to appear in whatever he possessed. Planned the control. He believed he had taken control of the situation was beginning. Toes. My mother opened the door. I slipped away. Felt my heart pause for a second. Standing there in a totally unexpected way was my friend, whom I hadn't seen in years. Maya, her older sister, had been residing in a different city throughout the previous few years. Andy was completely unaware that she was returning. My mom's expression softened upon seeing Maya's features are flushed with relief as she gave her a firm embrace. It was a time of complete comfort. A moment's break from the storm that was building within our house. Maya asked her, "What's going on, Mom?" Gaze darting between me and my mother and my brother could then sense the tension right away. I didn't realize how much I had been missing her up until now. The serenity she carried with her was nearly concrete, and it gave me a sense of a little simpler. We'll clarify later, Mom. Spoke in a steady but not unsteady tone, the persistent concern that had crept in prior to that. But Maya wasn't inclined to let things go. She looked over at my brother. Expression of seriousness about what's happening with her. Eyes narrowed as she asked the camera, "Why is this your first time filming?" After my brother began all of this, his eyes flickered uncomfortably as he paused, eye in the direction of the camera, and I could see the strain in his shoulders, the manner in which with his hands clenched, he parted his lips to talk, but nothing came out. It was Maya's voice, which at last caused the quiet. "Haven't you been doing this again? You have been shoving him, have you not?" The way she said it struck me like a blow to Maya had a terrible feeling she knew exactly what the ongoing relationship between my brother Andy was unaware of how much of this over the years. She had noticed how much she had become aware of the times we had all spent time together. And she wasn't simply she was no longer addressing the camera taking care of the power relationships that have been playing for a long time. The face of my brother turned pale, and for the I saw genuine terror in his eyes for the first time. He had misjudged Maya. Who wasn't he? She was only the older sister who had departed, the person who was able to see right through him. Andy thought he might try to speak, but he managed to escape it by doing something unexpected. Maya looked at me when it happened, becoming softer. And I could see the compassion in you. Don't have to do this, you, her. Eyes, you owe him nothing, she added quietly. I felt the weight. If it weren't like this. Her comment struck me more strongly than anything else. I felt like I could for the first time take charge that I didn't have before. To allow my brother to coerce me into I didn't want the power to have changed. And I was able to step with strength. Departed as I was about to speak something to my brother's camera flickered. The recording ended, and at that moment, the last component of the puzzle came together. But my brother hadn't been recording for whatever number of views. He'd been filming for a much darker project, a strategy to control me and reveal me in a manner that would damage my reputation. Fear began to seep in as they glanced at the screen. Right back there at the end of the message on the recording wasn't he. My brother had done something that had been put there by someone else. Someone who was keeping an eye on us all alongside a person who was well versed in everything. And that was ultimately the most horrifying twist of every message displayed on the screen. Felt like a kick to the stomach, but it wasn't simply an error or mishap, it was approposefully chilling. The message with the phrases were straightforward, yet they made me tremble. My back, you're not alone in being stared as everything briefly froze. The impact of what had just transpired struck me, and I became aware that the circumstances had went well beyond anything I have ever thought. This was more than a video. Or the deceit of my brother. There's another person out there taking the someone who pulls ropes from the shadows. Maya walked in knowing more than they should have. Her hand was on my shoulder, closer. It's over now, she murmured, grounding me. Her voice was calm and sweet, yet I could. My brother, listen to the desperation behind it. Was frozen in place, gazing at the display in unbelief that he had consistently been the one in control, but now everything was collapsing. My mother is still standing by the door, apart. Had at last put everything together. Her eyes have a mixture of rage and relief as she took a stride forward. Figure this out, she stated in a forceful voice. But now that all is over, I nod. Feeling as though the moment's burden has been lifted. The camera has ceased shooting from my shoulders. My brother, rolling, and whatever power believed he was gone. But this wasn't just. It was about taking action to save face. Return to command, and, for the first time in I felt like I had it for a long time. We spent the following few hours to determine what had occurred while extending toward the right individuals to guarantee that everything was managed. My brother can no longer do it correctly. Concealed beneath his bluster was finally compelled to deal with the repercussions of what he did. As the day came to a close, the household tension started to calm. Max, who had been tense the entire time, the ordeal ended calmly at my feet as though they were aware that the storm had overcome the unnerving sensation that lingered to watch. But I realized I had to let go of that dread, because the truth has surfaced. Now it was time to proceed. More powerful and cognizant of the forces that had occurred. It wasn't merely a video, but instead it was a lesson about management of control and the strength of, when it counts most, letting go.